The invite for the meeting had popped up on my computer screen at 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was simply titled Q3 Performance and Structural Review. In the world of global shipping and transport, vague titles like that usually meant one of two things. You were either getting fired or you were getting the promotion you had been bleeding for over the last decade. Considering I was the only person in the entire building who knew how to manually override our routing system during a database blackout, I assumed it was the latter. I was 54 years old, wearing a suit that was sensible rather than stylish, and had dedicated 12 years of my life to this company, GFS Logistics. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into Edward Higgins' office. The room smelled of expensive cologne and stale espresso. Edward, our vice president of operations, sat behind a massive glass desk that looked like it cost more than my first car. He did not look up immediately when I entered. Instead, he kept typing something on his phone, letting me stand there in silence for a solid 30 seconds. It was a classic power move, one I had seen him pull on vendors a dozen times to make them feel small. "Sit down, Ronald," he said, finally locking his phone and sliding it face down on the glass. I sat. I had a notepad ready on my knee, prepared to take notes on my new responsibilities as Director of Logistics. "We have reviewed the quarterly metrics," Edward started, leaning back in his ergonomic mesh chair. "Your department throughput is excellent. 99.8% on-time delivery rate for the Northeast Corridor. It is impressive work, Ronald. It really is." "Thank you, Edward," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have been refining the node weighting algorithms for the last 6 months. It is finally running smoothly." "Right. The algorithms," he said, waving a hand dismissively as if I were talking about changing a light bulb. "That is the thing, Ronald. You are a technician, a mechanic of the process, and we value that. But the director role, that requires vision. It requires leadership." My stomach tightened. I knew that word. Leadership was the corporate shield used to deflect merit and promote favorites. "I have managed the night shift team for 5 years," I countered, keeping my tone respectful. "I have trained the last 3 regional managers. I even trained you on our database structure when you first started here." Edward's smile did not reach his eyes. "And we appreciate that, Ronald. But leadership is not about knowing which buttons to push. It is about energy, optics. We need someone who can disrupt the status quo, not just maintain it. We need a change agent." He paused for dramatic effect. "We are promoting Chloe Gomez to the director position, effective Monday." The silence that filled the room was heavy enough to crush bone. Chloe Gomez. She had been in the logistics department for exactly 18 months. I had spent the last 6 weeks fixing her routing errors because she kept confusing gross weight with volumetric weight on international manifests. "Chloe," I repeated, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "Edward, with all due respect, Chloe deleted our master database list twice last month. I had to restore it from a backup I keep on my personal drive." Edward sighed, looking at me with distinct pity. "See, that is exactly what I mean, Ronald. You are focused on the weeds. Chloe is focused on the canopy. She has executive presence. The board loves her presentation on synergistic routing. You are very good at the background stuff." He stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. "You will report to her starting next week. I expect you to support her fully during the transition. Teach her the nuts and bolts so she can focus on the big picture." I stood up slowly, my knees popping in the quiet office. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my chest where my loyalty used to be. "Of course," I said. "I will give her exactly the support she needs." "Great," Edward beamed, mistaking my resignation for submission. "That is the team spirit we need. And Ronald, try to smile more in meetings. It affects the culture." I walked out of that glass office, the hum of the office air conditioning sounding like a distant roar in my ears. I did not slam the door. I did not shout. I went back to my desk, sat down, and looked at the 3 monitors that controlled the flow of millions of dollars of inventory. Edward wanted me to focus on the nuts and bolts. He had no idea that I was the nuts and bolts, and he had just stripped the thread. For 12 years, I had arrived at work at 7 a.m. and left after 7 p.m. I had skipped family gatherings, worked through holidays, and answered emergency calls in the middle of the night. My dedication had cost me my marriage 5 years ago, a casualty of the endless hours I poured into a company that now viewed me as an obsolete piece of machinery. I had built the entire logistics framework from scratch, writing custom code and establishing relationships with port authorities that no one else could replicate. As I stared at the flashing data points on my screens, I made a decision. I was not going to rage. I was not going to quit. I was simply going to become the exact person they thought I was. A coordinator who did only what was written in his contract. If they wanted a change agent, they were about to get one. Just not the kind they expected. I printed out my official employment contract and put it in my briefcase. The factory settings of my career were about to be restored. The following Monday morning, the atmosphere in the logistics room had shifted. Chloe Gomez had moved into the glass-walled office adjacent to Edward. She had already replaced the whiteboard full of critical shipping routes with motivational posters. One of them featured an eagle with the word "Disrupt" written in bold font. At 9 a.m., I was summoned for our first alignment session. Chloe was sitting on the edge of her desk, holding a latte. She was 32, ambitious, and fluent in corporate buzzwords. She looked at me over the rim of her cup, her eyes bright with the thrill of unearned authority. "Ronald, come in," she chirped. "Edward told me you are going to help me get up to speed on the technical side. I want to knock this out quickly so we can focus on strategy." "Strategy is important," I said, taking a seat. "But first, we need to review the morning protocol. The server sync happens at 4 a.m. If the Shanghai node does not handshake with the LA hub by 4:15, you have to manually override the port blockage codes. Otherwise, we lose about 40 containers a day to customs holds." I placed a thick binder on her desk. It was my manual, 12 years of error codes, workarounds, and contact numbers for the only 3 port supervisors who would answer a phone at 3 a.m. Chloe looked at the binder like I had placed a dead animal on her desk. "Ronald." "Wow," she laughed nervously. "This is a lot of paper. We are trying to move to a paperless ecosystem. Can you just email me the bullet points?" "It is not really bullet point material, Chloe," I said. "The legacy system is fragile. If you enter the date format as DDMME instead of MMDDD on the manifest, the system rejects the entire shipment. It costs the company $10,000 in late fees per incident." She waved her hand dismissively. "We will update the software eventually. I am bringing in a vendor next month to look at AI solutions. For now, just handle the technical glitches for me, okay? I need to prepare for the regional budget meeting. I want to show Edward I can cut costs by 15%. I stared at her. "You want to cut costs?" "The only reason our costs are low is because I spend 2 hours every night manually rerouting trucks to avoid surge pricing zones." "That is not automated, Chloe. That is me." She checked her smart watch. "Right, and we value that. But part of my new directive is to delegate, so you keep doing that routing thing. I am going to focus on vendor relationships. I have a lunch with the plastic suppliers in an hour. Just keep the lights on, Ronald. I am the captain now, but every ship needs a good engineer in the engine room, right?" "Right," I said. I picked up my binder. "Leave the binder," she said. "I will scan it later." I hesitated, then set the binder back down. It did not matter. She would not read it. She did not understand that the engine room was not just machinery. It was a complex web of dependencies that I held together with sheer force of will and a proprietary Python script running on my local machine, a script nobody else knew existed. "One last thing," I said, pausing at the door. "The routing script. It requires a manual token refresh every Friday at 5 p.m. If you do not refresh it, the connection to the trucking fleet database severs." She was already typing an email. "Refresh the token." "Got it." "Thanks, Ronald." She had not written it down. I walked back to my cubicle. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my contract and a mug of black coffee. I took a red pen and began to read my official job description. Title: Senior Logistics Coordinator. Primary duties: monitor daily shipment logs, generate weekly variance reports, liaise with warehouse supervisors, and update safety compliance documentation. Nowhere did it say manage the proprietary routing algorithm. Nowhere did it say train the director of operations. Nowhere did it say respond to emergency customs alerts at 2 a.m. Nowhere did it say manually re-optimize the fleet distribution to save 15% on fuel costs. I had been doing those things for a decade because I took pride in my work, believing that if I built the throne, eventually they would let me sit in it. Instead, they put a novice on it and told me to polish the legs. I picked up my phone. It was 8:45 p.m. Usually, right now, I would log into the secure server from my home VPN. I would check the orphan packages and manually reconnect them. It took about 45 minutes every night. If I did not do it, those packages would sit in the distribution center in Ohio for 3 weeks. I hovered over the VPN app. They want leadership, I whispered. They want optics. They want me to stay in my lane, so I decided to do exactly that. I deleted the company VPN app from my personal phone. Then I opened my personal laptop. I navigated to the folder containing my custom routing script, Fletcher op.py. It was a beautiful piece of code I had written 3 years ago that scraped traffic data, weather patterns, and driver legal hours to optimize our routes. I ran it locally on my machine, and it fed the results into the company main database. GFS Logistics did not own the script. They did not even know it was a script. They just thought the system was smart. I right-clicked on the scheduled task that ran the script automatically every morning at 6 a.m. I selected Disable. A small dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to disable this task? I took a sip of coffee. I am just focusing on the nuts and bolts, I said aloud. I clicked yes. The status changed to disabled. I closed my laptop. For the first time in 12 years, I was going to sleep a full 8 hours. I was not sabotaging the company. I was simply reverting to the factory settings of my contract. Malicious compliance is a slow poison. You do not see the effects immediately. It takes time for the unmaintained machinery to rust and the foundation to crack. I gave it 3 weeks before the first major alarm went off. I was wrong. It only took 4 days. The silence on the logistics floor broke at 10:14 a.m. on Thursday. It started with a low murmur near the dispatch desks. Then it grew into frantic keyboard clicking. Finally, it erupted into shouting. Why is the status still pending? The truck has been at the gate for 4 hours, someone yelled. I did not look up. I was busy filling out the weekly safety variance report, a tedious Excel spreadsheet that required me to manually input the tire pressure logs for our fleet. I was typing in 32 psi for the 50th time when my desk phone rang. It was Chloe. Ronald, can you come to my office now? Her voice was an octave higher than usual. I saved my spreadsheet, locked my screen, and walked slowly toward the glass office. Inside, Chloe was standing behind her desk, gripping her hair. On her wall of monitors, the map of the eastern seaboard was lit up with flashing red icons. What is happening? She demanded the moment I stepped inside. The Philadelphia hub is blocked. Nothing is moving. The drivers are saying the gate codes are invalid. We have 48 trucks idling on the asphalt, burning fuel. I looked at the screen. I knew exactly what was happening. My script usually auto-generated new gate codes every 6 hours and pushed them to the driver's devices. Without the script, the codes had expired at midnight. The system had defaulted to lockdown mode for security. It looks like a synchronization error, I said calmly, clasping my hands behind my back. Well, fix it, she snapped, pointing at the screen. Just do the override thing you do. I cannot, I said. She froze. What do you mean you cannot? I do not have authorization, I replied, keeping my voice level. When my role was restructured to senior logistics coordinator, my admin privileges for the security mainframe were revoked. Remember, Edward said he wanted to streamline access to leadership only to prevent data leaks. It was true, a minor detail in the HR paperwork that Edward had signed without reading. They had removed my root access to protect the system, not realizing I was the only one who knew how to operate it. That is ridiculous, Chloe stammered. I will give you my password. I cannot accept that, Chloe, I said. Sharing executive credentials is a Class A violation of the IT security policy. If I log in as you and something goes wrong, I could be terminated for cause. I cannot take that risk. Her eyes widened as she looked at the blinking red lights. Each blink represented a delayed shipment. The client for that hub was TechSource, our biggest electronics account. They had a penalty clause. $500 for every hour a shipment was late. Then tell me what to do, she pleaded, her arrogance evaporating into panic. You need to manually reset the gate tokens, I explained. Log into the server. Open the command line interface. Navigate to the user security directory and execute the reset command. Then you have to manually copy the new hex code to each of the 48 drivers' profiles. Command line? She blinked. I do not know how to do that. I thought there was a button. There is no button, I said. There never was. She stared at me. waiting for me to crack, to sit in her chair and save the day. I watched the clock on the wall. 10:22 a.m. Every minute was costing the company money. I have to get back to my safety report, I said. The deadline is noon, and Edward was very clear about prioritizing my assigned duties. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard her screaming for IT support. I knew IT would not help her quickly. The ticket would go to a queue that took 24 hours to process. That evening, I met my friend Oliver Cole at a quiet diner called the Rusty Anchor. Oliver was a sharp forensic IT analyst and lawyer who had worked with GFS Logistics years ago before being let go by Edward for refusing to install employee surveillance software. I slid my employment contract and the details of my routing script across the table. Oliver reviewed the documents while drinking his beer. "This is sloppy work by their legal department, Ronald," Oliver said, pointing at the IP clause. "Your contract states that any software developed during work hours using key equipment for the express purpose of your assigned duties belongs to the company. But you wrote this script at home on your personal laptop, and your job description contains 0 software development duties. You are a coordinator, not an engineer. So they do not own it," I asked. "Not a chance," Oliver smiled. "Under federal copyright law, specifically 17 U.S.C. Section 106, you own the exclusive rights to this code. They have been using your proprietary intellectual property without a license for 3 years. That is copyright infringement." "What is the play?" I asked. Oliver pulled out a document. "I registered Fletcher Logistics Solutions LLC for you this afternoon. We send them an invoice for retroactive licensing fees. $250,000 for the past 3 years. If they want to keep using it, they sign a service-level agreement for a monthly retainer." "Edward will never pay that," I said. "Then the system stays down," Oliver replied. "Let them see what the status quo looks like without your spark." By the second week, the decay in our operations was impossible to hide. The Philadelphia bottleneck had been cleared after 14 hours of chaos, but because Chloe and the junior IT team did not understand the load balancing algorithms, they had routed all traffic through a secondary gate with only one guard. The resulting delay cascaded across the entire eastern region. My inbox was flooded with frantic emails from regional managers. Route optimization failed. Delivery windows missed. Fuel costs skyrocketing. I moved them all to a folder labeled "Out of Scope." At 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, Edward Higgins walked onto the floor. He looked stressed, his collar unbuttoned. He marched straight into Chloe's office. Through the glass, I saw him gesturing angrily at the monitors. Chloe sat small in her chair, looking defeated. Edward came out 5 minutes later, his eyes locked onto me. For a moment, I thought his pride would break and he would ask for help. But his ego held. He turned and stormed back to his office. On my second monitor, which was turned away from the aisle, I tracked the weekly efficiency rating. Last week it was 98.4%. Current rating, 83.2%. A 15% drop in just 4 days. And the weekend was coming when the automated routing script usually balanced the driver schedules and loaded the Monday manifests. This weekend, none of that would happen. The mid-month operations review was usually a victory lap for Edward. He would display the green charts and take credit for my hard work. This time, the conference room was tense, the charts filled with bright red lines. "We encountered significant headwinds this month," Edward began, using a laser pointer to show the drop. "Fuel market volatility and port congestion on the West Coast impacted our throughput." Donald Henderson, the gruff regional director from Ohio, stood up. "Edward, that is nonsense. Fuel prices stabilized 2 weeks ago. My drivers are sitting in Cleveland waiting for routing numbers for 6 hours. We are hemorrhaging clients. What changed?" Edward stiffened. "We are modernizing our system, Donald. These are transitional growing pains. We are moving away from legacy systems." He glanced at me, an accusatory look. I remained silent. "Ronald." Donald Henderson turned to me. "You usually have a fix for this. Why are the routing tables not syncing?" I looked up from my notepad. "I am afraid that is outside my current purview, Mr. Henderson. As Senior Logistics Coordinator, I focus on safety logs and compliance. The routing strategy is under the director jurisdiction." I gestured toward Chloe. Chloe's face turned red. "We are auditing the system. It is a temporary vendor issue. We will have it resolved by next quarter," Edward interjected quickly, trying to stop the bleeding. After the meeting adjourned, Edward cornered me in the hallway. "You are enjoying this, are you not?" he hissed. "Enjoying what, Edward?" I asked. "The glitches. You think I do not know you are slow-walking support? I am following the exact protocols you approved," I said, meeting his gaze. "I am prioritizing my safety reports. If you want me to investigate system architecture, that would require renegotiating my contract and my compensation." Edward's jaw clenched. "Just get back to your desk," he muttered. "Yes, sir," I replied. "I have a lot of tire pressure logs to enter." The real disaster struck the following Tuesday. I arrived at work to find the parking lot empty of delivery vans. The loading docks, usually a busy hub of activity, were silent. I unlocked my computer and saw a company-wide email, "Urgent town hall at 10 a.m. By 9:55 a.m., the news had leaked. TechSource, which represented 60% of GFS Logistics' outbound shipping volume, had officially terminated their contract. They cited chronic delivery delays, data errors, and lack of tracking transparency. They had activated their penalty clause and moved their entire business to our main competitor, Summit Freight. The loss of the TechSource contract was a fatal blow. The company was losing millions of dollars a week. At the town hall, our CEO, Richard Harrington, stood on the stage. He looked furious. He announced an immediate internal investigation to find out how a department that was best in class 3 months ago had collapsed so spectacularly. Edward stood beside him, looking pale and sweating through his suit. After the meeting, my phone rang. It was Edward, my office now. I walked in. He did not look arrogant anymore. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. "Fix it," he said, his voice cracking. "I do not care what it takes. Get the routing running. If we show a 10% improvement by Friday, we might be able to salvage the TechSource account." "I cannot do that, Edward," I said. "Do not give me that contract garbage," he shouted. "The company is going under, Ronald." "I cannot fix it because the custom routing software belongs to me," I explained. "The system you have installed is the standard software the company purchased. The optimization layer was my personal script, fletcher.dop.b.py, and I have deleted it from my workstation." "You deleted it? That is sabotage. I will have you arrested." "No, you won't," I said, pulling a document from my folder. "Because my attorney has already sent a copy of the copyright registration and licensing agreement to your legal department. If you want to use my software, you have to pay for it." I placed the invoice for $250,000 on his desk. Edward stared at the paper, his mouth open, unable to speak. "I am going to lunch," I said. "I will be at the Rusty Anchor if the board wants to talk." By 1 p.m., my phone had rung 6 times. I ignored the calls, enjoying my lunch with Oliver Cole at the Rusty Anchor. At 1:30 p.m., a call came from an unknown number with an executive suite prefix. "Mr. Fletcher," the voice was formal. It was CEO Richard Harrington's secretary. "Mr. Harrington requests your immediate presence in the executive boardroom." "I am on my lunch break," I replied. "But tell Mr. Harrington I am willing to attend a consultation. I will be there in 30 minutes, and I am bringing my legal counsel." When Oliver and I arrived at the executive floor, the tension was palpable. Employees were packing boxes, and the rumor of immediate layoffs hung heavy in the corridors. We entered the boardroom, a long mahogany table surrounded by board members, the CEO Richard Harrington and the company general counsel Miss Halloway. Edward Higgins sat at the table, looking like a ghost. "Mr. Fletcher," Harrington said, skipping the greetings. "Let us get straight to the point. We need the routing system back online. We know you did something to the database. Reverse it, and we can discuss your future." "I did not touch your database, Mr. Harrington," I replied. "The standard database is running perfectly. It just lacks the optimization layer that I provided personally." "We need that layer back," Harrington said. "TechSource will reconsider their termination if we restore full tracking and routing efficiency within 48 hours. Can you do it?" "I can," I said. "Good. Get to work and we will discuss a suitable bonus." "It is not that simple." Oliver Cole spoke up, sliding 3 thick folders down the polished table. Those folders contain the copyright registration under 17 U.S.C. Section 106, the development logs from Mr. Fletcher's personal laptop, and an invoice for retroactive licensing fees. GFS Logistics has been using Mr. Fletcher proprietary software without a license for 3 years. That is copyright infringement, and under 17 U.S.C. Section 504, The statutory damages for willful infringement can reach up to $150,000 per violation. Miss Holloway, the general counsel, opened her folder. She scanned the code timestamps, then reviewed the IP exclusion clause in my contract. She looked at Edward, then turned to Harrington. "Mr. Harrington," she said quietly. The script was written on a personal device outside office hours. Since software development was not part of Mr. Fletcher coordinator job description, the work-for-hire doctrine under 17 U.S.C. Section 201 does not apply. The copyright belongs entirely to him. We have no legal claim to the code. Edward's face went white. "But he used our server to test it," he stammered. "Testing an external script does not transfer ownership." Holloway replied cold. "Especially when you signed the structural review document that stripped his access, claiming his technical tools were obsolete. You officially stated the company did not rely on his custom methods." Harrington turned his gaze to Edward. His voice was cold enough to freeze water. "Edward, you told the board this system was fully automated and owned by us. You promoted an inexperienced coordinator who lost our biggest account, and you stripped the access of the only engineer who kept this company running." Edward opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "You are terminated for cause. Effective immediately," Harrington said. "Security will escort you out." Edward stood up, his hands trembling, and walked out of the room. He did not look at me. Harrington turned to me. "Mr. Fletcher, if we pay this invoice, can you restore the system today?" "I can have it running in 10 minutes, I said. "And going forward?" Harrington asked. "Fletcher Logistics Solutions LLC will license the software to GFS Logistics for a monthly fee of $25,000, Oliver stated. "This includes maintenance and remote optimization. Mr. Fletcher will act as an external consultant, not an employee." Harrington took his pen and signed the agreement. "We will wire the $250,000 within 24 hours. Sign the contract." I signed the document. My hand did not shake. 10 minutes later, I walked into the server room. I logged into my terminal and executed the command. Python 3 Fletcher op.py. I hit enter. On the monitors in the operations pit below, the red flashing lights turned green one by one. The dispatch queues cleared. The trucks began moving. A cheer went up from the floor. The dispatchers did not know about the lawsuit or the licensing fees. They just knew the nightmare was over. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on my back porch at 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, drinking coffee and watching a cardinal land on my fence. My laptop was open, showing the GFS Logistics database humming along in the green. Every month, my LLC would receive a wire transfer for $25,000. I had effectively retired at 54. I spent maybe 5 hours a week updating the code, but I owned my time. I owned my life. For 12 years, I thought loyalty was a currency. I thought that if I worked hard, the company would reward me. I was wrong. The mistake was giving away my value for free, letting them believe my extraordinary effort was just standard procedure. If you are the go-to person in your company, protect yourself, document your worth. Keep a record of the systems you build. Read your contract and know exactly what you own. And never train your replacement without a written guarantee. I did not want to burn the company down. I just wanted them to pay the bill for the light I was providing, and when they refused, I simply flipped the switch. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next story.